The EBF Open Forum is a live Bible questions and answers program. What kind of Bible question do you have? What subject is of concern to you? Well, this is a program designed to offer you the opportunity to call in and ask questions or comments relating to the Bible. Our host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann, will respond by going to the Bible, the infallible Word of God. Our program is hosted Monday through Friday beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, except Wednesdays, when the program begins at noon Eastern. Call our toll-free number at 888-969-9883. Again, that's 888-969-9883. There will be someone there to answer your call and give you simple instructions to be on the program. You can also join us through Zoom video by going to ebiblefellowship.org and clicking the icon at the top. If you're calling in from another country, on our website, select the toll-free button to find your country's number.
Welcome, everyone, to E-Bible Fellowship's new open forum program. During this time, we're going to open up the phone lines to take your call, and each person is invited to give us a call if you have a Bible question or a comment that you would like to make. And I'll try to reply by going to the Bible and seeing what we can find out about the thing that you're interested in. And the Bible is a great book in countless ways. And one of the ways is that it is a mystery. It's a mystery. Anyone who likes puzzles and mysteries really should love the Bible, because the Bible is the greatest of riddles or parables or puzzles or mysteries. On every page of the Bible, when someone has a right perspective on how to approach the Bible and what to look for, and then you read maybe a historical account in the Old Testament, and of course, natural-minded people, whether they be theologians or pastors or whoever, natural-minded people, they settle for the surface meaning of Scripture, the historical record. They're quite content. Well, here we read about this particular event that took place in the history of Israel, and so they'll try to remember it, try to learn all about that piece of history, and maybe look for some significant moral teaching in the account, and then they think they've studied the Bible. Well, they haven't even begun. Well, no, that's not true. That's not fair. That is a beginning. We can take into account the historical, grammatical, and moral teaching of Scripture, but that's only a beginning. That's only a beginning. You haven't opened the ground, that's for sure. And what we're looking for in the Bible is the gospel, or the truth that lies on the spiritual level, the deeper spiritual meaning that you'll not find on the surface. And until we have found the gospel truth, the deeper spiritual meaning, we haven't really found the purpose for that verse or that chapter for being in the Bible. And that's the mystery. That's the mystery. How does this historical event of Israel going into Egypt, coming out of Egypt, or wandering the wilderness, or this corrupt king of Israel, or this good king of Judah, how does this fit in with the overall gospel, the teaching of the Bible, what is God trying to teach us? And we dig into that and study that, and the Lord reveals the mystery oftentimes, not always. Sometimes we struggle and struggle and struggle and maybe can't figure it out, but often he reveals his mysteries. He reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. And it's a secret because it's hidden in parabolic form. And when we define a parable as that which serves the high truth. Okay, we're going to begin by going to the first person on the phone today. Welcome to our program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Hi, Chris. Thanks for taking my call. Could we go to Psalm 139:20, please, and have you read that?
Okay, Psalm 139 and verse 20. For they speak against thee wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in. Well, let me back up so we get a little bit better of more of the context. In verse 19, surely thou wilt slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, ye bloody men, for they speak against thee wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. That would be God. That would be God who they speak against and take his name in vain.
Okay, then Matthew 15, verses 8 and 9.
Matthew 15. Starting in verse 8. This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men.
And then the last would be Luke 9:49 and 50.
Luke chapter 9. And verse 49, and John answered and said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him, because he followeth not with us. And Jesus said unto him, forbid him not, for he that is not against us is for us.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to reconcile what Christ answered to John about those who didn't follow, that they shouldn't forbid them to do that. But to me, if they aren't following the true gospel, they're actually taking God's name in vain, or preaching in vain, or maybe, stepping outside the realm of where they should be if they're not an elect. I guess, I'm trying to reconcile the fact that Christ said, he who is, not against us is on our part, or how do we understand his response? I need your thoughts on that.
Well, there was also in the camp of Israel in the wilderness, two men who were prophesying, and Moses also said, don't forbid them. I think he went on to say he would, or it would be his desire if all God's people were prophets. Now, since it says, I was going to say, we don't really know the type of gospel that this individual was bringing. But it does say he followeth not with us, and that could be an indication he's not following the true gospel, because they're following Christ. And that statement could mean that this one attempting to cast out devils was not following Christ. And we do have an actual account of that in the book of Acts, where there were some Jews who were trying to cast out a devil. And at that time, the devil basically was overpowering those Jews in their attempt to exorcise him. And I think we know God's program for the church age was that wheat and tares grow together. And so in the churches, this meant that the true gospel as well as false gospels were in view, within the whole corporate body, and it was basically God's plan not to do what did happen at the time of the end, which was, all right, let's get rid of the tares, let's bring my people out, and let's purify the gospel. It wasn't God's plan to bring purification to the gospel, that purity of teaching, getting right to the truth as the Lord did at the time of the end. So these kinds of statements may fit into that let them preach, let them teach these things, even though they're not following me. They're not following the way, the truth, that is Christ. But it's not time yet. It's not time to weed them up and to get rid of the tares. So the Lord put up with it throughout the church age, but at the time of the end, he no longer tolerates it at all. There must be a proclamation of the true gospel, or God is simply not with any individual or organization, even organizations or ministries outside the church. God's not with them if they are not bringing the truth, that especially the truths that the Lord opened up at the time of the end.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you for that question and bringing up those verses. And let's go to the next caller today. Welcome to our program. Please go ahead with your call.
Top of the afternoon to you, Brother Chris.
Thank you. Hope you're having a good afternoon too. Please go ahead with your question.
Can we look at Deuteronomy 22, verses 1 to 3?
Deuteronomy 22, verse 1. Thou shalt not see thy brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto thy brother. And if thy brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then thou shalt bring it unto thine own house, and shall be with thee until thy brother seek after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again. In like manner shalt thou do with his ass, and so shalt thou do with his raiment, and with all lost thing of thy brother's, which he has lost, and thou hast found. Shalt thou do likewise, thou mayest not hide thyself.
It seems to me that these verses are speaking about showing love to thy neighbor, brother, by sharing the gospel with them, that they might be saved during the day of grace. Can you speak a little bit more about what these verses are teaching spiritually?
Well, yeah. One thing we see here, and I never really noticed this before or put it together. You know how you're walking down the street and you find a wallet in the street, and there's information in the wallet. Maybe there's money in the wallet, and we look and we return it to the person. Well, I think that's exactly what God is saying here. So really, it's according to law, rather than take the money, even though you have the contact information, take the money and throw away the wallet. Hide that's what it's referring to. You see the sheep or the ox or the ass, which are valuables in ancient times. That was like currency. It was really it was riches, and so you find something of your brother's, and it even gets to the point where God says his raiment or all lost thing of thy brother's which he has lost and you have found, you shalt thou do likewise. Thou mayest not hide thyself. So that's interesting on just practical level. I never thought there's that saying, finders, keepers, losers, weepers, that actually goes against this in some cases. I mean, if you find something you can't, and the Lord even makes a point of addressing that. The details of the law of God are amazing. If you don't know your brother, well, hold on to it, and maybe down the road, you'll come to know whose it is. Now, what would be the spiritual meaning of this if an ox or a sheep go astray? Now, the sheep going astray, we think of Isaiah 53, which says about sheep in verse 6, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and Jehovah has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Okay, so all of God's elect are like sheep that have gone astray. Now, maybe we can also liken all mankind from the original creation standpoint. And we know all sinners have gone astray. They're off the mark. They're wandering far from the way that God created and made them to walk, and they have left the boundary markers of the land, the ancient landmarks that the law of God establishes, to stay within the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, and no, they transgress. They go beyond the law, and then they're off. They're lost, and this is why God does typify the sinner, and actually, more than likely, I think, focus in, the more you look at it, more and more on the elect, like the prodigal son. He grew up in a house, and then he went out to the world, and when he finally came to his senses and came back, and his father saw him a great way off, then he ran towards him. And in explaining to the elder son why he had a feast for him, he said, this my son was lost, but now is found, was alive, or was dead, but now alive. And that's the whole idea of Christ being the shepherd, the good shepherd of the sheep. And he was sent, as Jesus himself said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That I think would define the sheep that are in view. It's only the sheep of the house of Israel, spiritual Israel, who are all the elect children of God. We have gone astray and we were lost in our sin, and Christ sought us out and found us. Well, here, thou shalt not see thy brother's ox or his sheep go astray. And it must be, the brother must be Christ, that because it's his sheep, and again, the elect would be his sheep, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto thy brother. So this would be instruction to, to Christians, to the church, to those bringing the gospel, to the pastors, elders, deacons, to all those given responsibility and a duty to minister the truth. You see your brother's sheep, the Lord's sheep, going astray, someone's lost, and you have to bring them unto him again. How do you do that? You preach the true gospel. You share the truth of the Bible, because through hearing the truth of the Bible, God can bless it and save the person. And when someone's saved, we're returned. Isn't that what it says in 1 Peter chapter 5? In 1 Peter 5, we read about feeding the flock, when the chief shepherd shall appear, but I think it says somewhere here about being returned to the shepherd of our souls. Not sure exactly where that is.
I think it's in 1 Peter 2:25, I think.
Oh, okay. 1 Peter 2:25. Yeah, that's it. For ye were as sheep going astray, but are now returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls. And we see how that fits right in with this lost sheep, and you have to return it. You have to return it. Well, that means there's a duty according to law. But basically, this is a law of God requiring faithful preaching, because it's only through faithful preaching that the sinner can be returned unto the shepherd, who owns the sheep. And so it goes on here in Deuteronomy 22, and if thy brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then thou shalt bring it unto thine own house, and shall be with thee until thy brother seek after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again. That's very interesting. When you have all these other parts in place. Well, what does that mean? If our brother isn't near, or if we don't know him, then you will bring it unto your own house, and it will be with thee until thy brother seek after it. Well, I think as far as the brother, until he seek after it, that would probably apply to God's program of times and seasons. That, there are certain periods that the Lord has specified where he will send forth the gospel, 2 outpourings of the Spirit, 2 periods of rain, and in which he seeks the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But there's some questions there. What does that mean if you do not know him, but you bring it unto your own house? Well, we can consider bringing it into the church, the house of God. Perhaps that's in view, and there were definitely people in the churches and congregations that did not know Christ in a saving way, they, intimately through salvation. But is God here giving a law to them? That doesn't seem to fit. So yeah, some things not sure about, but it shall be with thee until thy brother seek after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again. In like manner shalt thou do with his ass and raiment. So let's look at raiment. If someone loses their cloak, their raiment, in the Bible, raiment is a covering. So it's a similar picture as being a lost sheep, because now someone doesn't have their covering, and that would be covering over sin. Therefore, the loss of their raiment that you have to return to them is you have to bring the gospel so they can be covered, and that would according to this law, be returning the clothing, the raiment to them, and now they can be covered, or their sin nakedness can be covered over. So that's the general teaching of this. Just that a couple questions in verse 2, but I think that would be the idea.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for that interesting passage. And let's go to the next person on the phone today. Welcome to our new open forum program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hello, Chris. My question is in Deuteronomy chapter 28, where the first 14, 15 verses, God is speaking about blessing after blessing. And I believe from verse 16 on to the end, they're curses, all these curses. Now, my question is these pertain to the church during the tribulation period when God was not saving anybody in the church? It's as if God's curse was upon the church during that time.
Yeah. God, you're right. It's broken up. First 14 verses, blessing is upon Israel. And it's, this is speaking of Israel. Speaking of Israel, and we know Israel spiritually represents the church. So it would apply to the churches. And then God says in verse 15, which is like a transition verse, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Jehovah thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed or cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. So when we're thinking, okay, this is referring to the church, does the church have any identification with the city? The Bible likens it to Jerusalem, earthly Jerusalem. So in Jerusalem, in the corporate church, they'll be cursed. What about in the field? The church is in the field, it's in the world. And it has all these branches, all these ministries, all these outreaches to the nations. They're all cursed. They're all cursed. Once God ended the church age and judgment began at the house of God, verse 17, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. And the basket would probably apply to fruits, and the store to grain, that kind of thing, which comes from harvest. And so their harvest is cursed. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind and the flocks of thy sheep. And that would be their own children, the fruit of their body, or spiritually, those that come into the congregations like children. And the fruit would also point to that. The fruit of the land, the fruit of the many churches all over the world, curse, curse, curse. No blessing. And blessing identifies with salvation. The greatest blessing is, as God says in Psalm, I think it's Psalm 133, the end of verse 3, upon the mountains of Zion, for there Jehovah commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. Well, now no blessing, no salvation, no good hand of God upon you, no pleasure from God. He's taking no pleasure in anything that the church does, in all their activity. It's not just every Sunday when the pastor gets in the pulpit, but that's included too. There's a curse upon the congregation. There's a curse upon the pastor preaching. There's another verse that says God will curse their blessings. You would think it's a blessing when they open the Bible. The pastor opens the Bible, all the members in the pews open their Bibles. Well, surely it's a blessing to read the Bible, but God has cursed their blessing. And he has cursed the sermon. There'll be no blessing upon the word preached. He's cursed the hearing, because there's no hearing as far as in a spiritual sense upon the words preached. And everything else, the hymn singing, the praying, everything is cursed by God, because the very act of conducting service is rebellious against God. He ended the church age. He ended the ministry of pastors. He caused the pastors to cease from feeding the flock. He ended the gathering of congregations within church buildings under the authority structure of churches. It's over. It's done with. He has disassociated himself entirely from it. And God himself is the essence of blessing. The Spirit of God is the essence of blessing. And if a church group or a people get together and they have all the trappings that were present during the church age, but they lack one critical thing, which is the Spirit of God himself, then what good is it? It's a vain exercise. It's an empty activity. It brings no blessing to anyone. And if it's broadcast on the radio, cursed are the airwaves. If it is printed, cursed would be the book, or the booklet or magazine. Every arm and branch of the church, every avenue of ministry they attempt is under the wrath of God. God will not bless it. He will not shine his face upon it in any way. That's what Deuteronomy is saying, and it's terrible. Terrible. It goes on, and I mean, you think I just went on a little bit, and that's nothing. Read Deuteronomy 28 from verse 15 until the end, which I think is like verse 68, over and over and over again, saying the same thing, that you are cursed, and that's the situation. You know, tragically, that's the situation we have today and have had in the churches for decades. Since the year 1988, there's been cursing, the curse of God upon the church's ministry. Does anyone seriously think that the world would be the laughing stock and mockery, or excuse me, that the church, well, the world is also at this time for because God's judgment and curses upon them. But it started with the church. And does anyone think that the corporate church would be the laughing stock and mockery that it has become to all the world if God were with them? Would the countless reproaches that have been laid upon them have happened if God were there to defend them, to ward them off? No, no. It is because the church is basically the world entered in, calling themselves Christian, and God is not with them, and the blessing of God is not upon them in any way.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go to the next person on the phone today. Welcome to our program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Could you please read Revelation 13, verse 12?
Okay, Revelation 13 and verse 12. I'm going to back up. Verse 11, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
The first beast, is this the same as in Genesis? Like in even maybe in the account when Eve was speaking with the serpent? Is that the same?
Oh, yeah. The serpent, the serpent is Satan, the devil. He has many names. If we go to Revelation 20, in verse 1, an angel who is Christ comes down from heaven having a great chain in his hand. Verse 2, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So right here in this one verse, 4 names. He's called the dragon, serpent, devil, Satan. And that's not all of his names. He's called the man of sin, son of perdition. He's called the beast. Now, when we normally, I say, I won't say every time, but practically every time you see Satan called the beast, it's a name assigned to him, especially at the time of the end. See here in Revelation 20, it was the devil, serpent, dragon, and Satan that was cast. Let me go back there. Cast into a bottomless pit in verse 3, and cast him, singular. So it's not 4, it's just 1. Cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And the 1,000 years are a figurative time pointing to the completeness of the church age. The devil, Satan, and so forth was bound in 33 AD at the cross throughout the church age until 1988, and then he was loosed in verse 7, Revelation 20, when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. Now here's another name. Gog is the name of Satan once he's loosed, and Magog are the nations, the Gentiles, the unsaved emissaries of Satan. And And then verse 9, and they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city. The camp of the saints, the beloved city, is the church. That's typified by Jerusalem. And in Revelation 13, notice, now again, Satan was bound and placed in a bottomless pit. The Greek word translated bottomless pit is abysso, and I think it's found 9 times in the New Testament. It's translated as bottomless in Revelation 9 a couple of times, and it's also translated as bottomless pit. I think maybe 2 or 3 times in Revelation 20, once in Revelation 9, and once in Revelation 11 in verse 7. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. Well, we didn't read that the beast was put into the bottomless pit. It was the dragon, the serpent, the devil, Satan. He wasn't called the beast, but who comes, or what's the name the Lord gives when he comes out of the pit? The beast ascendeth. So it must be the same evil being, the fallen angel, Satan. And also, the Greek word abysso, bottomless pit, is translated twice as the deep. The deep. It's used in Romans 10:7. Shall Christ descends into the deep. Christ went into hell. Bottomless pit is equivalent to hell and death. And also in Luke, when about 2,000 swine run down a steep place into the sea, and the word deep is used to describe that. They went into the deep, or into the abysso, into the bottomless pit, because it's a picture at the end of time. About 2,000 years is in view from when Christ first experienced, or in the demonstration on the cross. About 2,000 years later, the ungodly are brought down into hell, into the deep. But anyway, there God ties or joins together the word abysso with water. It is a sea. It's called a lake in another of the gospel accounts. And that body of water, called the sea or a lake, is called the deep, the abyss. It is the bottomless pit that's pictured. So in Revelation 13, verse 1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The sea is the bottomless pit. It's rising up out of the deep, because, again, the Greek word translated bottomless or bottomless pit is also translated deep in a verse that is describing the sea. And so this is after the figurative 1,000 years. Satan is loosed. And we read in verse 7, and it was given unto him, this beast described here, it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Same thing from Revelation 20. Once he's loosed out of his prison, then all of a sudden we're introduced to Gog and Magog, who come against the camp of the saints and encompass the city, the holy city. And so, just very excellent harmony with all these things. Now, as far as I think that answered your question, didn't it? Or was there something else?
I think so. And I was thinking about in Genesis, when God speaks about the deep and darkness in the deep, is this also in harmony with the deep that you're
Well,
speaking about, the
well,
abyss?
it's interesting in the Genesis creation account. The the world starts out with water. In Genesis 1, well, we know verse 1, God in the beginning created the heaven and the earth. Verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And it's not until we get to verse 6 and 7, I think. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. So there was waters above, those deep rain space clouds that the Lord unleashed with the deluge of the flood. It's because, here he's telling us he put waters above, and then there's first a division of waters above from the waters on the earth, and the whole planet is covered in water. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And then in verse 9, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. The dry land, verse 10, God called the dry land earth. Well, he had made the earth right in the beginning. It was there. It was there all along, but it was covered with water. And when we look at what the Bible has to say about being covered with water, we realize it points to the wrath of God. God covered the earth again with the flood. The 15 cubits above the highest mountain, the whole world, whole earth was covered with water, and that was judgment. It was obviously wrath. It brought this death and destruction. And so in the beginning, just like there's darkness first, just like there's darkness, and then let there be light, the gospel is coming to shine into the darkness, just like Christ entered into the world. And as Isaiah points out, there was in Isaiah 9, where we read in verse 1, nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was, well, not that, verse 2, the people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them has the light shine. Same thing. The world is flooded. It's water everywhere, pointing to the same thing as darkness everywhere, sin and no hope. But then God gathers the waters into one place, and the statement, let the dry land appear. Think of the parting of the Red Sea and all water. And here are Moses and Israel. They're going to die until God parts the water, dry land appears. So the appearance of dry land points to salvation. They cross as on dry land across the Red Sea, or go to the River Jordan. Same picture. River Jordan overflowing its banks all the time of harvest. And then the waters stand up. Once the ark, the priests carry the ark and touch the brim of their feet in the river, and then the water stands and they cross over as on dry ground. We could really lay out several verses in the Bible, fairly good number of verses, where dry land points to deliverance. It points to salvation. Now, at the time of the end, there's a verse In Revelation 16, verse 12, that the rivers, the rivers of the Euphrates, and the Euphrates is the river of Babylon, so it's the rivers of the world, are dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. That is the highway that Isaiah 11 speaks of, and Isaiah 19 and Zechariah 10. There's a highway that God is going to make for his people to leave this world as on dry ground, because using the figure of the flood, we typically think of more spiritual flames that have engulfed the earth, but you can liken it to the flood of water that has engulfed the world, and we will cross safely. Not a drop of the wrath of God will touch us, although we're here. We're here. We're enduring through it. God has made a way for us to pass. This is the highway that the Bible speaks of.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And by the way, God does speak of creating great whales in Genesis 1, verse 24. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth. And in the Old Testament, the word whale is the same as dragon, and does point to Satan. In Isaiah 27, we read in verse 1, in that day Jehovah with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, the crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. The word dragon is the same as whale. So God will slay the whale, the dragon, who's another name for Satan. But thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go to the next person on the phone this afternoon. Welcome to our open forum program. Please go ahead with your call.
I have a question for Mark 12, but first of all, I would like to praise the Lord for the Day in the Word in Miami and track sharing. The airline workers and the airport workers are receptive when I gave them the tract. And I thank God for the safe arrival. There was a couple from Jamaica, and they were the only people that had the same parking lot as I did. And they were going home to Jersey, but they took me around till I found my car. And the wife graciously, anyway, she took the track. And so anyway, I thank the Lord for that. And the 3 studies, the topics being the dry land, which you just mentioned a few minutes ago. And the other one was the messengers, which could be angels, but we learned that there are 3 groups of messengers. So I'm always excited when there's going to be studies. So now I'm going to be excited and looking forward to the June conference, mainly for the studies too. Now, my question is from Mark 12, 28, 34. I might have brought it up before, but
well, let's see. Mark 12, verse 28 through 34 or end 34?
through 34.
Right, Mark 12, 28. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said unto him, Well, master, thou hast said the truth. For there is one God, and there is none other but he. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered discreetly, he said unto him, Thou art not far from the kingdom of God. And no man after that durst ask him any question.
Okay. The Lord said somewhere in the Old Testament that his people did not know his name, Jehovah. They did not know who he is. And we learned that Jesus Christ is Jehovah. And these two commandments, the first and the second, verse 31, it says, and the second is like, and the word like means, when I looked up the concordance, it means similar in character or in like manner. So since we know Christ is one with Jehovah, so that means he was not only in the first commandment, he was also in the second commandment, and fulfilled the neighbor and friend himself, him being God. He came to fulfill the neighbor that loved us, or our best friend. So that would mean the two commandments are of equal importance. Therefore, the sequence of 1 and 2 is not according to importance, rather, it's according to chronology in time. And so the scribe was coming close to recognize Jesus is the same God in the first commandment in Mark 12. Could you please comment? Thank you.
Well, yeah, here, Jesus answered, because the question was, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered, the first of all the commandments is, God is one Lord, and he is to be loved with everything, the heart, the mind, the soul, the strength. 4 things are listed. It's interesting that from listing the 4 things in verse 30, and the response of the man in verse 33, the word understanding is used rather than mind, but I think that's helpful. It helps us to understand a little bit more about what is meant by mind. But it has to do with the inner part of the human being, that we need to be born again. What is the first commandment? Well, to love God. But what is the definition to to love the Lord thy God with everything? And the biblical definition that Christ gave for love, if you love me, keep my commandments. My commandments. So to love God in heart, mind, soul, spirit, strength, in everything within the soul, means to keep all the commandments. All the commandments. If you fail to keep one commandment according to the Epistle of James, you're guilty of all. And so it is perfect obedience to all God's commandments, or we could say the whole Bible, that must be in the heart. And that's what God does when he saves us, which is why in 1 John 3, we're told, 1 John 3, let's see, I think it's verse 9, whosoever is born of God does not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin because he's born of God. If you don't commit sin, if you cannot sin, what is that saying? If you were to look at it and flip it, that you're keeping God's commandments perfectly. You're keeping all his commandments. You are loving the Lord in your heart, mind, soul. That would be what that means. And the second is like, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There's none other commandment greater than these. And we could probably find some verses, I'm sure, where there's such as in Ephesians, that says in Ephesians 4 in verse 32, and be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. Or the parable of the servant forgiven much, or forgiven the great debt, and then goes about his business, and he has a fellow servant owes him a little tiny fraction, and he puts his hands around his neck and demands payment, and so the lack of love for the brother, lack of mercy, of forgiveness, as he had been forgiven, as mercy had been shown him, is a failure. It basically indicates there's no love of God within, and so it points us to salvation. Someone who is truly saved, God will work these things out in their heart, and they will. Another point is, how do we love our brother? And it's been a little while since I looked at this, but it's not what people tend to think as far as loving our brother. It's not just being very nice and kind and friendly and whatever. It's not that kind of action. Here is what the Bible says in 1 John 5. 1 John 5, I'll start in verse 1. Whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and everyone that loveth him that begat loveth him also that is begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of God. Okay, well, good. We're going to be told how we love the children of God, how we love our brother. By this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and keep his commandments. So, number one there, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, and soul, is also the answer to number two. That if you're born again, as 1 John 3, verse 9 said, you do not sin, you keep his commandments. You love the brethren, and because God will move within you, if you're one of his, to will and to do of his good pleasure. In the day of salvation, you'll be moved to sacrifice and go forth, bringing the gospel that people might be saved, the elect might hear and become saved. In the day of judgment, you'll be moved to sacrifice, to take up your cross, to follow the Lord, and to feed sheep and go forth with the gospel, as defined as the truth of the Bible in proper time and season, for the sake or concerning the elect. And the Lord will, or of course, people have various roles in those things. There could be prayer. Some they're aged, sickly, or whatever, their family situation won't allow, so they can pray or they can support financially or they can do various things to get the gospel out without themselves going. But it all comes down to one's heart condition. One's heart condition. If they're born again, there will be the keeping of these two laws, which is more, or as it said there, and that more is translated more excellent in another place, which is more excellent than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. Why? Because this is loving God with all your heart, loving your brother or neighbor with all your heart is a result of God's salvation. And sacrifices could never produce salvation, and they're just outward things that are types and figures, but this would be more excellent. It would be greater. But thank you for calling and sharing, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us today and sharing your questions and comments, and especially the Bible verses we had a chance to read and consider. But we have come to the end of our program. Lord willing, we'll have another open forum program tomorrow evening, 6 p.m., and that's the normal time for this program, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m., except on Wednesday when it's 12. But may you have a good rest of the day, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.
Thanks again for joining us for E-Bible Fellowship's live open forum program. You can call in with your Bible questions Mondays and Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern, and Wednesdays beginning at noon Eastern.